You only need two things to literally generate free electricity right in your home. Yes, seriously, you heard that right. Here in the United States, the average family is dropping anywhere from $1,700 to $2,500 a year just on their power bill. And most people just shrug it off, right? Like, hey, it's the electric bill. What are you going to do? But here is the massive, glaring problem. The second a massive blizzard hits and the grid completely collapses, all that money you paid buys you absolutely zero protection. What do you actually do when the power goes out? Light a few candles? Sit around, clutching your phone, just praying your power bank doesn't die? Watch your elderly parents freeze in sub-zero temperatures? I know for a fact some of you watching have already lived through this nightmare. Think back to that insane winter freeze in Texas. People were literally freezing in the dark for days on end. And the crazy part? It wasn't because they didn't have backup plans. It's because the backups they thought they had completely failed them. Those emergency batteries were either already totally drained or they barely lasted a couple of hours. Picture this. The lights cut out. You instantly go to that messy junk drawer in your kitchen, digging around in the dark, and you finally find a couple of crusty old batteries. But look closer. Are the edges of that metal casing starting to turn kind of yellow? Is there this crusty, weird, white or yellowish powder leaking out of the seams? Yeah, that's battery acid leaking. If that stuff touches your skin, it burns like crazy, and if it touches the circuit board of your emergency radio, it's instantly fried. Game over. So basically, we're spending our hard-earned cash hoarding emergency supplies that are not only completely useless, but literally destroy our gear. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jared Min. Every day, I'm here exposing the everyday secrets they don't want you to know. But beyond the leaking acid, there is a much bigger issue here. These commercial batteries are fundamentally designed to keep you dependent. Think about it. How long does a standard AA battery actually last? In a flashlight? Maybe 4, 5 hours, if you're lucky. In a radio? Maybe a day or two. But what happens if the grid is down for 3 days? 5 days? A whole week? That is the exact moment most people realize a terrifying truth. You spent all this money on Duracells, fancy power banks, and backup lanterns. But face to face with a real multi-day blackout, all of that expensive gear combined can't even guarantee you basic lighting and communication. But here is the craziest part. While you're panicking, you have something sitting quietly in your kitchen drawer right now. Nobody ever takes it seriously. This thing never needs to be charged. It will never leak acid. It literally has no expiration date, it costs less than $1, and it runs on chemistry that's been proven for over 200 years. I'm talking about a plain, totally ordinary roll of aluminum foil. So wait, why the heck does almost nobody know that a roll of foil holds this much power? Well, stick around, because I'm about to pull back the curtain on the crazy secrets of aluminum foil. Let's rewind all the way to 1792. This Italian physicist named Alessandro Volta did this wild experiment. He took copper plates and zinc plates, stacked them on top of each other, separated them with cloth soaked in salt water, hooked up a wire, and boom, electricity. A steady, continuous electrical current. This was literally the first true battery in human history, known later as the Voltaic pile. The science behind it is actually surprisingly simple. When you drop two different metals into an electrolyte solution, they kick off an oxidation-reduction reaction. Electrons literally start running from one side to the other, and that process creates an electrical current. It's basic middle school chemistry, honestly. But let's be real, most of us completely wiped that from our memories the second we graduated. And here's where it gets interesting. Aluminum foil is actually one of the absolute most efficient metals on Earth for this specific reaction. Why? Because aluminum is basically a solid battery of pure, stored chemical energy. Do you have any idea how much electricity it takes to smelt aluminum? To pull just 1 single kilogram of pure aluminum out of bauxite ore, it burns through roughly 13 to 15 kilowatt hours of electricity. That energy doesn't just vanish. It is violently locked away inside the atomic structure of the metal itself. So, when you drop aluminum into an electrolyte and let it oxidize, all that trapped energy slowly releases. It turns back into a flow of electrons. It becomes raw power. In fact, lab data shows that when you use aluminum as an anode in a fuel cell, its theoretical energy density can hit around 8 kilowatt hours per kilogram, which is roughly 3 to 4 times more powerful than the mainstream lithium-ion batteries sitting in your smartphone right now. So, purely from a chemical standpoint, that roll of foil in your kitchen, it is a serious powerhouse. It's definitely not just for wrapping up your leftovers. And look, this isn't just some dusty, theoretical textbook science. People have literally used this to survive in the most desperate situations imaginable. Flashback to 1941, France. We're talking deep into the Nazi occupation. The French resistance underground desperately needed to keep their secret radio networks alive. But during wartime, normal batteries were completely non-existent, and getting outside supplies was impossible. So, a group of resistance fighters got incredibly resourceful. They literally ripped aluminum parts off the wreckage of downed fighter planes, mixed it with caustic soda, they swiped from German supply depots, and built these crude but highly effective metal oxidation power sources. They actually gave this makeshift battery a badass codename, Coldfire. It gave off no heat, no flames, absolutely zero light or sound that could give away their hidden positions. Just a silent, invisible flow of electrons powering their radios and keeping the lifeline of the entire underground network beating. In those brutal conditions, this wasn't a science experiment, this was a real, hardcore survival tool. And this kind of MacGyver-level stuff happened more than once during World War II. Combat engineers in the field realized that even when a shot-down plane was completely totaled, the aluminum alloy on the fuselage was usually perfectly intact. As long as they could scrape together an electrolyte, that scrap metal instantly became a power source. Being trapped in an environment with absolutely zero resources actually forced people to master the most direct applications of basic chemistry. Even after the war ended, this technology didn't disappear. It just went covert. During the Cold War, the United States Navy poured tons of money into researching aluminum seawater batteries. The reason was brilliant. Submarines and underwater drones need to operate completely submerged for massive amounts of time. Traditional rechargeable batteries would die way too fast, but the ocean itself is literally an endless supply of natural electrolyte. The oxidation of aluminum in seawater could pump out stable, continuous power for weeks on end, with absolutely zero need for a charging station. That research turned into a whole vault of military patents, and pieces of it only hit the public eye after being declassified. Then, cut to 2002. Just a regular high school kid in Ohio sets up a science fair project. He used discarded aluminum soda cans and salt water to keep a whole string of LED lights burning bright for 30 days straight. The judges gave him a solid grade, and then the project just completely vanished into the archives. No Silicon Valley investments, no follow-ups, no breaking news segments. When you put all these stories together, it doesn't prove there's some massive conspiracy deliberately suppressing the tech. It points to a much simpler reality. When you are totally broke, stripped of your resources, and the grid is completely dead, human beings will instinctively fall back on the raw laws of physics to find answers. These principles have always been there. They never left. It's just that in our comfortable Amazon Prime peacetime world, nobody feels the urgency to actually use them anymore. But I know exactly what you're thinking right now. If this science is so insanely powerful, why isn't every tech company using it on a massive scale? Well, the answer really comes down to two parts. Part one is a totally legitimate technical hurdle. Aluminum air batteries have one fundamental flaw. They are consumable. As the battery runs, the aluminum is physically eaten away by the oxidation process, turning into aluminum oxide, which just looks like this chalky grayish paste. Once the reaction is done, the aluminum is gone. You have to throw in a fresh piece. You can't just plug it into a wall and recharge it like a lithium battery. That limitation is very real. It's not a conspiracy. It's just physics. Part 2. Back in 2014, an Israeli company named Finergy actually built a car powered by an aluminum air battery. It drove over 1,000 miles without needing a single charge. And when it finally died, they just popped in a fresh aluminum plate, took like 3 minutes, and drove off again. The United States Navy also developed aluminum seawater batteries for underwater drones that can cruise for weeks without ever touching a charging port. But try walking into a Best Buy to find this stuff. You can't. It's not because the tech isn't mature. It's because the business model is a complete nightmare for them. Look at the battery industry today. They sell you a lithium battery, it degrades in 2 or 3 years, so you buy another one. You have to buy the phone, buy the charging cable, buy the wall brick, pay a premium to swap a dead battery, It is a perfectly designed, never-ending ecosystem of recurring revenue. But an aluminum-air battery? You literally just need kitchen foil and baking soda water. The cost is basically zero. You cannot build any kind of subscription logic on that. The existing commercial interests naturally push the tech that makes them rich, while the really disruptive stuff stays locked in labs or crazy niche applications. Nobody had to call a meeting and say, let's suppress the aluminum battery. But the end result is exactly the same. You can only buy alkaline and lithium at Walmart, not a DIY aluminum air kit. Oh, and there's another, more hidden wall. Every modern consumer electronic you own is standardized around 3.7 volts, which is the working voltage of a lithium cell. The entire industry, from your laptop to your Bluetooth earbuds to your power banks, is built completely around that standard. But an aluminum air cell maxes out around 1.2 volts. You have to stack multiple layers just to reach a usable voltage, and its output characteristics don't perfectly match lithium, so it's not a simple drop-in replacement. And there you have it. Good old market selection at work. Okay, enough history and science lessons. Let's get to the most practical part. If the grid totally fails tonight, and you are literally stuck with whatever is sitting in your kitchen right now, could you actually build a working power source? The answer is absolutely yes. And I'm going to walk you through exactly how to do it, step by step. First off, here's everything you're going to need. If you add this all up, it literally costs less than $1, and I guarantee it's sitting in your kitchen right now. Number 1, standard aluminum foil. Seriously, just the basic, cheap stuff from the supermarket baking aisle. It doesn't even need to be the heavy-duty kind. Number 2, baking soda. Just your classic baking aisle staple. Not baking powder, not club soda. We're talking pure sodium bicarbonate powder. Number 3, paper towels. Just basic kitchen paper towels. Number 4, copper. The absolute easiest way to get this is grabbing some pennies or a little scrap of bare copper wire. Pro tip, if you're using wire, hit it with some sandpaper real quick to scrape off the oxidation layer. It conducts the electricity way better. Number 5, wires. Literally any thin conductive wire you can scavenge. Honestly, if you are completely out of options, you can literally just twist up strips of aluminum foil to act as a wire. Number 6, a glass of warm water. That's it. No soldering irons, no crazy special tools, no desperate runs to the hardware store. Now for the assembly steps. Start by making your electrolyte. Just start dumping baking soda into your warm water and stir it like crazy. Keep adding it until the powder literally stops dissolving. That super saturated cup of baking soda water is your electrolyte. The higher the concentration, the better the ion transfer, and the more stable your power is going to be. Next, cut your paper towels into little square pieces roughly the same size as your foil, dunk them completely into your electrolyte glass until they are soaking wet, then pull them out and set them aside. Take your aluminum foil and cut it into squares too. Honestly, about 6 by 6 inches is totally fine. Now we start stacking, and you gotta follow this order: foil, wet paper towel, copper penny, or plate. Then you just repeat: foil, wet paper towel, copper. Here is an absolutely critical point. You got to remember this. Every single layer of foil must physically touch the copper from the layer right below it, but it absolutely cannot touch another piece of foil. If foil touches foil, you instantly short-circuit the whole setup and kill your battery. If you're worried they might touch, just stick an extra layer of dry paper towel between them to insulate it. Once your stack is built, just hook up a wire to the very bottom piece of foil and another wire to the very top piece of copper. Boom. You now have a negative and a positive terminal. Just a quick 4-layer stack will easily kick out about 1.5 to 2 volts, which is more than enough to fire up an emergency LED light. If you're trying to actually charge your phone, you're going to need to stack it up to about 20 layers and hook it up to a little USB step-up module. You can grab those on Amazon right now for a few bucks. Seriously, buy 1 or 2 now and toss them in a drawer. You will thank me when the blackout hits. Aside from those steps, you absolutely need to pay attention to these safety warnings. Rule 1. This is not a lithium battery. You cannot plug it in to recharge it, and you can't just store it fully built. The aluminum physically gets consumed during the reaction. Once that foil turns into a gray, mushy paste, that cell is dead, and you have to swap in fresh foil. The good news is, foil is dirt cheap, so 1 roll goes a ridiculously long way. Rule 2. This reaction does off-gas a tiny bit of hydrogen. So please, do this somewhere with decent airflow. Don't build a massive stack of these inside a tiny sealed-off closet. Rule 3, that electrolyte is mildly corrosive. Just wash your hands when you're done, and don't let it sit on your bare skin for long periods. Rule 4, the voltage on this thing is going to slowly drop as the reaction burns out. It's not like a lithium battery that gives you steady power until the very last second. So, if your lights start getting a little dim, it isn't broken, it's just telling you it's time to swap in a fresh batch of foil. Look, real, hardcore emergency prepping is never about putting all your bets on one single solution. A truly solid home backup logic should look like this. Short-term blackout, a day or two. Your fully charged power banks and standard flashlight batteries are completely fine. Don't overcomplicate it. Mid-level blackout, 3 to 7 days. This is when lithium batteries start failing you. A small portable power station paired with some solar panels is honestly the best bang for your buck right now. You can find them anywhere from a few $100 to over $1,000, depending on your wattage needs. Long-term grid failure, over a week. When this nightmare actually happens, you aren't just looking for electricity. You're fighting for water, food, heat, and comms. The real value of this kitchen foil battery in this scenario isn't that it's going to replace a gas generator. Its value is that it costs literally pennies, the materials are literally everywhere, and in an extreme doomsday scenario where every other piece of tech has totally failed you. It can give you basic lighting and radio communication so you aren't completely cut off from the world. And believe me, in a real disaster, that tiny gap could be way more critical than you think.